What happens when a scientist trades the lab for a film set and ends up directing some of television's most talked about stories? Today's guest proves that there's no single path into Hollywood, and her journey is anything but ordinary. Welcome to the Scene and Nerd podcast. The Scene and Nerd podcast presents Blerd, where we dive into the stories behind the storytellers and explore the creative worlds that shape the entertainment we love. Today's guest has one of the most fascinating journeys into filmmaking. You'll hear from science labs and academia to directing some of television's biggest stories as well as movies. She's brought her unique perspective to projects across film and television, including work in the Star Trek universe, is where I first encountered our guest. Championing sustainability in production and helping create more opportunities for women in filmmaking. We're hanging out with Dr. Valerie Weiss to talk about the unexpected road that brought her into Hollywood and what really happens behind the scenes of some of the most iconic shows. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Weiss.
Hi, Will. Thank you. So happy to be here.
Thank you for being on. It's great to have you here. Like I said, I really enjoyed it. Right before we started tonight, I was just sharing with you my enjoyment of two of the episodes that you've directed of Star Trek, and I know a lot of folks are here for that, and we'll definitely get to that. But before we get into what you've done as far as your Hollywood and some of the work that you've done there, when I first learned that you are a PhD trained scientist from Harvard, a little small school up in Cambridge, Massachusetts, I just really was just fascinated by that. And you've had some really amazing career paths. And if someone encountered you during your years of when you were doing your studies in the sciences, would they that you end up directing television and film?
Oh, that's a great question. I've had this parallel interest for quite a long time. When I was at Harvard doing my PhD, I had an inkling that I might want to be a director because I had started directing at Princeton in college, but I was also majoring in molecular biology and loved biology and really was uncertain what the best career path that made the most sense was. And I can tell you, this is not the one that made the most sense that I chose. All logic would point to staying in the sciences, which is a lot more stable. But I did start a film program when I was at Harvard because I really wanted to learn to be a filmmaker. I had a lot of experience directing actors and doing theater, but I knew nothing about, cameras and staging for the camera and camera blocking and everything related to transferring storytelling onto the screen. And so I started a film program for graduate students at Harvard because I wanted that to be my film school while I was there. I figured, why not?
Right.
So I think people who knew about that, it was very well attended both by students and members of the Boston film community. So I think people had an inkling that I was serious about it. But again, no one has a crystal ball. And I did finish the PhD.
Yeah.
So I think I probably surprised a lot of people by going all the way.
Yeah. Did you do a postdoc or anything or did you just go
No.
straight into film?
I was like, oh my God, no. I mean, being a postdoc seemed like so much more difficult lifestyle. My first movie, Losing Control, there's a character named Rudy in the film. It's set in a lab. It's who's a postdoc, and he's driving a cab to make ends meet because you don't get paid very much, and just a very, very difficult lifestyle. So if you're not totally sure that it's what you want to do, so yes, I did not do a postdoc, but I admire people who do.
Cool. Speaking of, I know you shared how you created the film studies and everything there. What was the first TV or film that really where that just really jumped out to you where you were like, I think I want to do this for a career?
Good question. I mean, I wanted to act before I wanted to be a director. So I wanted to be in this business. But I think and then when I started directing plays, that's when I was like, oh no, I don't want to act at all. I really want to direct. It uses both sides of my brain. And I don't know if there was a particular movie, but I think once I got to Boston, I started to go to film festivals all the time. I would go to local film festivals, but also to Toronto Film Festival and see 4 films a day. And I think I just really immersed myself in the process, I read every single book on indie filmmaking, and it was like the 90s. So, Brad
Yeah.
Anderson was making movies in Boston, Dylan Kidd was making movies. It was Hal Hartley was at Harvard at the time. So I think and Darren Aronofsky was a huge
Oh, yeah.
influence
Oh,
on
really?
me. Yeah, because he had
Huh.
made Pi. I didn't know him then. I know him now, but
Mhm.
he had made Pi
Yeah.
and published a manifesto about making it for $20,000. And I read that, and it was the beginning of
Mm.
the digital video revolution. And I was
Mm.
even more sure that it made sense to go this route rather than film school, which is a very expensive investment, because the cost of making a film was a fraction of what it had been in the past. And so once I read that, I was like, okay, I think I can do this. And all I need is a script. I knew directors needed to control material. So I made myself a promise that by the time I finished graduate school, I would have a script, which I did. It's
Nice.
called Losing Control. And it was about a female scientist who wanted proof that her boyfriend's the one. And yeah, during that era is when I figured out, that I wanted to go the independent route to start. Bottle Rocket I
Mhm.
loved with Wes Anderson, and
Yeah.
it was just a very
Mhm.
exciting time for indie filmmaking.
Yeah, yeah, I guess that was, a few years ago, and I think that was I do remember the indie film, like, phase of things where a lot of it, like you said, Wes Anderson and others really, like, burst on the scene. So, to that point, I mean, when people hear about your background, and of course, how it jumped right out of the gate talking about your career switch, do you think of it as a switch or just another chapter as far as your life?
Oh, that's such a good question. You ask all the good questions, Will. I don't know. I think it feels like a chapter. It's obviously a switch, but I went from doing something really hard and unpredictable to doing something else that's really hard and unpredictable. And so it's almost
Mm,
like my lifestyle and my approach to my work hasn't changed. It's just what I get to do and think about has. I still feel like me. And
okay.
in fact, doing a PhD, one of the reasons I wanted to do it was to learn persistence and tenacity because in science, as I'm sure you know, every day you fail because if you didn't, what you were working on wouldn't be special enough to publish, right? You have to pick something that
Right.
hard that people care about. And so I really learned, the grit that it takes to do something worthwhile. And
Mhm.
obviously, the details of what I do every day are different. It's a lot more social and interactive, which I really love. Um, but my
Yeah.
approach about thinking about a project and a question and what the essential question is that I'm trying to tell, especially when I'm writing, is just like getting at the heart of what's the best experiment to do to test a hypothesis. And so I
Mm,
still feel like the same me. I'm just doing something,
yeah.
qualitatively different.
Yeah, I mean, that is very interesting you bring that up because it really seems that even though it seems that the skill sets you learn in academia have translated over to the entertainment field. Is that a fair assessment or
Definitely, definitely. I mean, I did X-ray crystallography, which was a very male-dominated field. I think there was maybe one or two
mm,
other women in my lab.
mm,
And being a director now, thankfully the numbers are much better. But often I'm the only woman on my crew
mm,
or on my set, and so that didn't feel uncomfortable to me because I'd come from that. Also, the technical aspect, whether I'm doing action or VFX or doing something on the volume never intimidates me because I was,
yeah,
doing very techie stuff for my
yeah,
PhD. And yeah, again, just like rolling up your sleeves and having to be super prepared before you start something. I prep like crazy when I
mhm,
do a show or do a movie. And you have to in science because otherwise you're going to waste a lot of money, a lot of people's time. When you get that time slot to get to go to a synchrotron, for instance, to get high energy X-rays to do your experiments, you can't waste that. So a lot of the skills are very, very transferable for me.
cool. Yeah, that's very interesting, and yeah, that will lead to my next question as far as, like, the prep, and, so sounds like the science aspects of, being able to even though you didn't really transition out of hard from the science world into the entertainment world, and but you did have experience working in a lab and planning the prep and everything like that. Did so? Do you feel that there are those skill sets, and you talked about this, touched on this a little bit, but maybe I'd like for you to go a little bit further. Uh, Being that you have those science skills, how did that help shape you as a director?
Definitely. I mean, I always approach a script from figuring out if the internal logic is consistent first.
Mm,
I'm
mm,
very sensitive radar for things that don't track and cause an effect that isn't direct. And so when I read a script, I can very quickly figure out where the problems are in the writing
mm,
or the characterization. And so it's very helpful to flag that stuff early, because if you start to be creative and direct on top of that, it's just like being in a house of cards that collapses, because audiences can always tell, they sense when something isn't tracking. And so I'm able to see that right away. And in fact, it's very hard for me to move on until I've gotten my questions answered, or if we've solved something in the script or the prep or whatnot. Um, and then, so that's a big part of it. And then research. For instance, I did a movie called A Light Beneath Their Feet, which was about
mm,
a mom struggling with bipolar disorder and her codependent
mm,
relationship with her daughter. And so I
yeah,
did not want it to feel like a disease of the week movie. I really wanted you to have empathy
uh,
both for the mom and the daughter. And so I did a lot of research. I went to the Brain Behavior Foundation, Research
mm,
Foundation conferences and learned everything I could
yeah,
about bipolar disorder, which then informed so much of how I directed the character and understood the world that families are living in with this illness. And so I do that for everything. I did a librarians episode with a Civil War reenactment and ghosts, and I
mm,
went to a Civil War reenactment in Portland and studied that. So I
yeah,
think my love of research leads to an
mm.
authenticity in the directing, in the world building, and the props, and the costumes, and certainly in the acting.
Yeah, yeah, so yeah, that really to that point, what grabs you first when you do get a script and you're doing that prep? Is it the character? Is it the visuals? I mean, you mentioned several things there, but what is the f what is that thing that just really grabs you and where you just like, "Okay, I really need to explore here's what I
Yep.
wanna explore in this episode or in this film that I'm directing."
Yep. It's always characters, tone, and theme for me. And for me, essentially, the characters are the theme because their actions tell you what the theme is. And so, a really well written script, you know the theme because of the choices that the characters are making. And so, that's the first thing I look at. I never think about visuals until much further down the line, because I never want to have gratuitous images just because they're cool. Like, they always have to be driven by character and
Mhm,
story, and
yeah,
tied in organically to what we're doing. And so
yeah,
I always start there, and then tone is also probably neck and neck with that, because a really great script, you see the tone immediately.
yeah,
Especially when it's a complicated tone, like, I don't know, some of my favorite movies are like Flirting with Disaster, or a Pedro Motovar movie where you're mixing genres. And so that tone has to be calibrated very, very carefully when it's a complex tone. And so I have to be thinking about that as early as I'm thinking about character and theme as well.
got it, yeah. So, as someone who is a planner, and you've seen sounds like from what you said as far as prep and everything, do you plan every detail of a scene? I mean, I know there's blocking, and I dabbled back in undergrad in acting class, and we worked with the directing class. So when you talked about, originally wanting to be an actor, you're like, "No, I think I'm gonna direct now." It's taking me back to my undergrad days. But it what do you plan how take me into a day of Dr. Weiss when you get a script and you are starting to plan and block a scene and just the whole mechanics as far as what's your process as a director? Do you
Sure.
go come as do you do it as a feel, or is it more like a more technical aspect given your scientific
Yeah.
background?
Great question. I'll talk about TV in this case because it's simpler, because when I do a film, I'm building the whole world. Whereas TV, I'm coming into, you know, a project that's mostly cast, mostly has its sets, and just for the sake of this conversation, it's going to be
Yeah.
easier to describe that process. So, yeah, I get the script and then, I'll make all my notes about subtext, what's really going on here. I'll do all the homework I talked about with theme and character exploration. And then as soon as I can, I try to get on to the set if it's a standing set, which
Mhm.
means, like in Star Trek, it's the bridge, for instance, or conference room, versus a location, which is something that we have to find each episode. So those might not be figured out at the beginning of my prep. But for any existing sets that we have, I will find time to go there, either by myself or I'll bring my AD or my DP or a PA. And my first step, like you said, I need to feel it. I'm such a feeler. And it's funny, I just talked to Steven Chbosky, who did Wonder and he did Perks of Being a Wallflower.
Okay.
And he's the first director I ever heard say he has to feel it before he sees it. And I'm exactly that way.
Hmm.
I mean, most directors I think talk about just they see the movie in their head, and I really don't until
Yeah.
I've lived it.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
I'll go on to the set and the stage, and I'll have to, and I think this is where my acting background really helps. I'll move in the space. Like I'll walk around and I'll kind of mumble it to myself and sit or stand. I'll just kind of do it like I think they will do it. And
Yeah.
then I might invite whoever I brought to do it so I could watch or do it with me or say the scene. It sort of depends because a lot of it,
Mhm.
even though I'm moving in the space, I'm hearing and seeing it and feeling it in my head. And I would say
Yeah.
like 90% of what I do in these pre-rehearsals is what the actor ends up doing without me even prescribing to do that. So I'll just know because there's beat changes, right? There's a beat change that might be when someone sits or stands up, and you just sort of it's very intuitive to me at this point. It's not
Yeah.
analytical so much, and so that drives the blocking. And then I'll invite my DP into the conversation and show him the blocking and talk about where I think the camera might be. And then they might suggest things. They might be like, oh, what if we bring them closer to the window? We'll get that nice side light, or they'll be in
Ah.
silhouette over here, which really will
Mhm.
fit with the loneliness idea for the episode. And so we start to improve upon it, and talk
Yeah.
about visual themes and rules. When we get to Star Trek, the first episode I did for them, we had a lot of visual rules that
Mhm.
were assigned by character. And so we
Mhm.
were very, very strict about how we did those. And I think that's why, even though it was a courtroom episode, it felt really dynamic visually.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so basically, I'll go through that. And then by the time we're ready to shoot, I will have a shot list. Sometimes I'll have storyboards if it's appropriate.
Okay.
And, we'll do a rehearsal. And that's where all my prep allows me to be very fluid on the day because
Okay.
I've thought it through. I have a way of doing it. I present the start of the scene to the actors. We'll read the words. We'll talk about
Mm.
any questions they have. And then I'll say, okay, I was imagining, Rebecca, you might walk in here and maybe halfway through the scene or on this line, it might be a good time to just to sit. And then at the end of the scene, Yatide, for instance, maybe you leave and you shut the door behind you, and all we see is just the slit of Rebecca. We're just seeing
Yeah.
her eyes at the
Mm.
end. Like, how do we get
Yeah.
there, you guys? Let's just those are our goals. Let's see how it feels. And then they'll do
Yeah.
it and they'll say it feels good or it doesn't feel good, or we'll find a different way to do it. And we'll just sort of like keep massaging it. And
Mhm.
then when we all feel happy, we'll put down marks and then show it to the operators and the rest of the crew. So, it starts with a plan, but if an actor has a better idea, and that happens often, um, I remain open and flexible. But sometimes it's a negotiation because they'll do it a certain way, and I'll notice, I'll feel that it's not as emotional if they look this way or
Sure.
look that way, and then we'll have a conversation about it, and we'll try it. But generally, it's really lovely and collaborative, and it's not super prescribed. I certainly hope it doesn't feel that way anyway to them on set.
Yeah. Yeah, to that point, I mean, so it sounds like so you really look more towards the emotional truth of a character or scene than necessarily technical precision, which I know just taking it to Star Trek for a minute, I know I've heard some of the actors on those shows talk about, especially in the I guess during the Rick Berman years, technical precision was a big thing. But it sounds like you're more into the the emotional truths of the scene.
It's both. And I think you do have the technical precision. Like if there's specific shots that you want, which ultimately I do and I will, especially transitions in and out of scenes. But I don't think that's something the
Yeah.
actors should ever have to worry about. I mean, on the rare occasion, we
Uh,
might say, you know, if you don't mind looking this way, it'll help me match cut to something else. But generally, their job is not to have to worry about it. And my job is to give them another reason to do it so that
yeah.
it feels within their character. Because the second they start thinking about those things, and some actors are very comfortable with it and thinking about the technical,
Mhm.
and it doesn't take them out of character, but a lot aren't comfortable that way. And
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
I'm absolutely thinking of the other stuff, but given a choice between the two things, I would always choose emotional truth. But really, it's more that I let emotional truth lead the technical choices and lead. I start with those and then I design my visuals around what maximizes the emotional choice the most.
Got it. To that. And what types of scenes do you really get excited to direct
Mm.
whenever you doing that?
I
Depending on
love
the
a
show, I
fight
mean, is it a
scene.
genre or oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love a fight scene because to me it combines the technical and the emotion. I mean, it's
Mm.
maximal conflict, right? And something I
Right.
I really pride myself on as an action director is I'm always directing from a place of emotion and character. So the very first thing
Mhm.
I do when I have an action scene is talk to my stunt coordinator and talk to them about the beats where we can draw out character. Um, for instance, I did a show called Outer Banks, and the first scene I ever did was a fight between a character named JJ and his dad. This is a fight. They fight all the time. You know, his dad's abusive, but this is the fight where JJ realizes his dad actually hates him and it's not
Mhm.
just being drunk. And so I really wanted to build in a moment where the dad is choking JJ on the floor and we're cutting
Yeah.
to see JJ's face and back to the dad and get into those close ups and have that moment of truth where he realizes that before, and that's the turning point in the scene. And it's not, wasn't scripted, but to me, that was the key to making that scene work. And so, and similarly, in The Slot Who Ate Its Tail, when Anson Pike is fighting with the scavengers, I
Oh, yeah.
built in a moment where they could see through the door. He was using the door as the shield. And I wanted a
Yeah.
moment where they stopped and you could see
Mhm.
Pike look at him before deciding
Yeah.
to hit him because I wanted that moment of like being rash and not
Yeah.
being able to see that this was another human. And so that was, those moments are very, very important to me when I'm designing it.
Yeah. I remember that scene, and it worked really. I totally got that. So
Good.
definitely see that. Yeah, I like a good. To me, it sounds to me. I have a similar thing with fight scenes and stuff. It's got to have a purpose. I mean, because that's one of my biggest peeves. It's like I'm not all. If you're going to have it, it's not about the spectacle of it, but it really, how does it serve the story? I guess.
Yep, I agree.
Cool. Yeah, yeah. What's something that an audience member, as we've talked about here, with the story, with directing style and creative process, don't realize how much a TV director shapes an episode. Do you have? Because I know you mentioned when we first started, television and film being two different things. Whereas filmmaking, the directors have a real big role in it all as far as the creative aspect of it. Whereas a TV director sometimes maybe just comes in, as the hired gun of the week, with especially if it's as whether it's an IP series like a Star Trek or your programs that you've done on Netflix like Outer Banks and others, and Mixtape. How much flexibility do you have as a TV director coming in,
Yeah.
especially with with certain IPs that may just have a tone that you can't
Hmm.
deviate too much from that?
Yeah.
Or
It's
do audience expect certain things from you?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it differs show to show. I mean, one of the reasons Star Trek is so much fun to direct is because every episode is a different genre, and they really
Mm,
pride themselves on hiring filmmakers who are going to come in and put their stamp on it. I mean, they specifically cast certain episodes for certain directors. It's not just who's available
yeah,
for the slot. And so in doing that show, there's a tremendous amount of creative freedom. I mean, it's wide open. And in fact,
Mm,
you're pushed to be as creative as possible. So
mm,
that's really exciting. Um, yeah, and I think, even within shows that are more prescribed in terms of what the show is, I think there's still a lot of room to put your stamp on it in terms of, I mean, you're designing as a director all of the shots and you are directing the actors. Nobody else is doing either of those things. And that's, a large part of what people are experiencing. And we do get on an hour show, we get 4 days of a director's cut. And on some shows,
yeah.
there's 2 additional days where you get to do producer's notes. So you're really your direction hopefully is staying with it, as long as possible through the finished product. But yeah, it really varies by shows, and I think a lot of showrunners, are excited to be collaborative, and that's why they're excited to have different directors, is to have them come in and bring their ideas, and the cast gets excited for somebody new and fresh. And um, I think it's I don't know, a really fun thing about TV that I teach the first time DGA Directors Guild directors class, and I think we quote John Wells that says, every week you make a circle and you can color it in however you want, but it still has to be a circle. And that's, I think, a great analogy for TV directing.
That's a very good point, that I hadn't really thought of. So I'm learning so many things more about how, the mechanics of creating TV and hearing this conversation with you tonight. To that point, as far as there's obviously the production side of, the filmmaking side, but there's also the business side, and we're, of course, in the streaming world now, but it's a weird world because we still have linear television as far as with the, traditional, networks, but we're also in the streaming world as well now with this so many platforms and all. What is your relationship with that now as a director? Do you find, especially like with timing and stuff, because I mean, there's some shows that seems to take forever on some streaming platforms to like
Mm.
come back. So does that like limit your ability to, take on various projects if you see something really cool on linear television that you really want to do, but because
Mm,
your schedule, it's gonna be like your that month or, however long it's gonna be taken up. So
yeah.
what is it like now, seeing the transition in the entertainment industry from the traditional linear to now to
Yeah,
streaming?
it's a great question. I was just looking back at my resume and seeing. I think I've directed probably, I don't know, 40% broadcast, 60% streaming,
Mhm.
um, and it's crisscrossed in the beginning of my career, more broadcast, and then more streaming recently. But I just did Watson for CBS, which is broadcast, and it's interesting because it used to be that streaming was sexier than broadcast, and people would start in broadcast and then they wouldn't want to go back to broadcast, and everything changes all the time, right? And
Yeah.
now, with the contraction of the business, you hear broadcast only wants broadcast directors. Like they want people who know how to do that
Mm.
specific thing of a 5 act structure with the cliffhanger for each commercial, and to be able to get it all done in 42 minutes. And um, so I don't think you were necessarily asking about the mechanics of doing the job. I think you're asking about booking these
Yeah.
jobs with their different, I think the industry is so crazy right now. Like there's barely a pilot season. There's barely
Right.
a broadcast. I mean, traditionally broadcast starts used to start booking people for the summer
Yeah.
through February, but even that has changed and there's shorter orders. So now it's just all over the place. So it's,
Yeah.
whatever job comes in at a certain time, if you have the block of time and you want to do it, I
Yeah.
mean, you just say yes. It's
Yeah,
much
yeah, no,
harder to
actually,
plan.
that's yeah, yeah, I think yeah, I'm glad you answered that took it in that direction because I think I was curious about, like, what you just your answer, which is how how things with the contraction and, understanding how broadcast productions work versus, say, a streaming production. So I appreciate you really, fleshing that out because it does, um, especially now, because I mean, it seems for years, like just for example, with broadcasts, it seemed like everything was going to streaming. There was like the traditional upfronts was like it used to be like maybe pre 2020. I felt like upfront. See, May was like this time of year was like the time that we would hear the upfronts and people we would
Yeah.
get coming in the fall. Now it's just sort of like went away, but it seems to be slowly creeping back. I think the networks are doing upfronts again. So
I think we're about to hear about a bunch of shows being picked up because it's the beginning of May.
mm,
But everything's so in flux. I mean, they just a whole bunch of very hot hit shows I just read
yeah,
were reduced from like 20 episodes to 13 to make room for
mm,
other shows. And it's just in the past, a hit show would have 22 episodes, regardless repeatedly. It's just a different time.
yeah. Do you find the reduced episode count? Um, what is your feeling about that? I mean, as a viewer, Uh, we it feels, one of the things you just see if you're scrolling on the internet is like, why only 8 to 10 episodes, and then it gets into the whole people, like, start using the buzzword filler for episodes. So you can't waste an episode because you only have 10 or because this episode is filler. How do you feel about this sort of how how this philosophically, how is it something that frustrates you as a director or, as a creative, just sort of seeing how that, you know
Yeah.
how
I
has,
mean,
like, changed the process? Has that changed the process for you?
I mean, it's hard to say as a director. I think one of the most fortunate things about my career is I've gotten to work on so many different things. Like I've
Mhm,
worked in every genre, things I never thought I would ever do or enjoy. I've gotten to do and loved. And every job, I'm surprised by the next job. I'm like, oh, okay, I never thought about that, but sure. And then I end up loving it. And so for me, because there's so much variety, how long a season is or isn't doesn't impact me professionally. Creatively as a viewer, you know, in the old days, as you say, with broadcast, you'd get very attached to these characters. And I think The Pit
mm,
feels the most like TV
mhm,
from when, we were growing up, which is, that's 15 episodes and it's not broadcast, it's max. But like you are so addicted to these relationships, even though that show was
mhm,
so stressful, so well done, and you get to know these characters, you just like down it, It's just like my kids,
yeah,
watch Friends on loop. They've watched all 10 seasons, probably
yeah,
5 times. And it's because the characters feel like friends in their lives. And so I
yeah,
think, when we get these shorter orders or we get into streaming numbers, it's shows feel less like that. Each episode feels like it
mhm,
has to be an event rather than a slice of
mhm,
life. And
yeah,
I miss the slice of life. Actually, the show that I did that's about to drop May 15th, it's not like
yeah,
that. It's a lot more like a slice of life and hanging out with people you really want to be around the dinner table with. And so I
yeah,
feel like it's going to be very successful because people are going to want to hang.
yeah, yeah, let's just go ahead and jump right to that. I know that is a show that, that is, coming on Amazon Prime on May the 15th. I think all 8 episodes are dropping. What
Mhm.
pulled you into that project?
Yeah. Oh, I loved that one. I was very lucky to know the co-creators, and Kristen Robinson from doing Suits. I think my first Suits episode they wrote, and we've stayed friends. We loved working with each other. Always wanted to. Ian and I have developed together. And when this got greenlit and they called, I was like, yes, 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 yes. I'll do anything with them. They come from the show Parenthood and the Jason Katims camp,
Okay.
and the show very much has the DNA of Parenthood. It's
Mm,
funny, it's full of heart, it deals with tough, tough family issues. But it
mhm,
does it in a way that's very real and not sensational, and not gratuitous. It's just fabulous, just like they are. And so yeah, the cast is amazing. Scott Foley, who I was lucky enough to work with on Scandal years ago, is one of the
yeah,
leads, and Erin Hayes is one of the leads. She's tremendous. And It's just a really, really special show with a lot of special people.
Yeah. I see you're gonna be I saw looking at internet, IMDb, I saw you're doing episodes 5 and 6 as were the ones you were directing
Did.
on?
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
the show is about Scott plays a minister named Malcolm whose wife passed away 9 months ago. And he has three kids. And his wife's best friend, Lori, her husband left her 6 months ago. And she's a member of his
Okay.
congregation. And they've been helping each
Okay.
other, but they also have started to really care about each other. And so it's a will they, won't they story that's complicated
Ah,
by the fact that she has kids that are intertwined with his kids, friendships, frenemies, all sorts of things. So
yeah,
it's
cool.
it's really great.
That's great. Now, I know you said I know some people may have seen it, and if you have seen it, if you're listening or watching the podcast on YouTube or listening on audio, don't spoil it for folks who haven't seen it, but it had a soft launch earlier this year. Uh,
Yes.
yeah, for without getting into any spoilers, are there some things about the space does this project live in as far is it a dramedy? Is it a, what is it? Or is it a little mix of, what are folks
Yeah.
is it a drama? What types of what genre what, I guess, theme is this?
It's I think it's firmly in the dramedy space.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, it's very much like Parenthood. It's definitely got humor.
Okay.
It's got pathos. It's got big emotional stakes. You will cry, but you will also laugh.
Mm.
And you will feel like you really know these characters. And hopefully, you will be dying for a season two because it would be so great to make one. But
Yeah.
it's really special show. I have a feeling it's the kind of show people will really want to get together and watch and talk about.
Yeah. I know all 8 episodes are dropping all at once, but hopefully, is it one of those shows are there moments where even though it may be a binge, well, do you think there's some moments, without spoiling anything, that will, become that, moment where it becomes sort of the proverbial water cooler chatter that, people are, like, talking about on social media, that kinda thing?
Definitely, definitely. I mean, there's it's set in Atlanta, and it's the music
Okay.
scene is a part of it. So the country music scene's
Okay.
part of it. So there's some great musical performances in it. Um, there's some action, some big things that happen. There's a lot of important themes. In fact, the Kids Mental Health Foundation is a partner with the project, and they
Okay.
just had a big event at I don't know if you're in LA, and at the Grove, which is sort of a big popular outdoor mall in Los Angeles. And so they had the cast and the writers, and I got to go help kids, with make friendship bracelets, and
Oh,
it
nice.
was a beautiful thing. So
Yeah.
there's a mental health component to this that I think
Yeah.
people will
I
really
think
appreciate.
I saw some, yeah, I think I saw that on your I think I saw it on your socials, maybe on Instagram, with about that event. So, yeah, that's really awesome. Anything else about this project that you would like for our listeners or viewers to know about?
Yeah, it's the studio is made for Amazon and Wonder. Wonder is
Okay.
a that does a lot of faith-based entertainment. And their very popular show is House of David, which I think
Okay.
has
Oh, yeah.
broken records
Yeah.
for audience. And it was really fun to work on a project like that because even though there's a faith-based element, it really felt like it's not a preachy show. It very
Mhm.
much feels like something that could be embraced by all faiths, and it was very special that way. I don't know. I think it's the
Yeah.
kind of thing I think families will be really happy to be able to watch with their kids in a way that
Yeah.
you can't really do with Euphoria, for instance. So
Yeah. To that point, I know you mentioned with the mental health aspect of it being a very family-friendly show. Are there anything in the current landscape that really makes it relatable, with like you said, with the mental health and kids and family dynamics and things that, make
yeah,
it relatable for folks that,
sure.
again, not to provide any spoilers, but, uh
Yeah, definitely. I think any families who are dealing with divorce, it's going to be
mm,
very, very therapeutic and relevant to see how this family does. Grief is a big
mm,
issue for this, and what that does to kids when they lose a mom, and who takes the place of that, a dad who's trying to
Mm,
do it all for his family and also be a leader for his congregation when he really doesn't know why God took his wife
yeah,
away, right? And explaining that to his
right.
kids who then question their own faith, right? I mean, how can you believe
Yeah,
in God when bad things happen? And so really big questions that just
yeah,
by being human, we ask ourselves. So,
yeah.
what's nice is it's just done in a really naturalistic, realistic, everyday way. And so,
Mm,
um, it's my favorite kind of thing to do where there's real stakes, but it also
yeah.
feels really intimate and subjective.
Nice, nice. Well, that really I'm looking forward to checking it out when it drops. One of the things you've done as a filmmaker is, and one of the causes that you've really taken up is sustainability and green filmmaking, and really wanted to hear a little bit more about that.
Thanks for asking. I mean, I was really excited when I saw the script for my second Star Trek episode, not just because Kirk got to be in the captain's chair for the first time,
Yeah,
spoiler alert, but I assume most of your fans have already seen it, but
yeah.
because of the environmental subplot of the
Mm,
scavengers and that they were launched from an Earth that didn't think it could survive the environmental
yeah,
crisis. And then the way they just had to be able to steal fuel and collect and hoard and that hoarding mentality of what a scarcity mindset does to a society. So I loved that was part of the storytelling for that episode. On the production side, I'm very, very active. I'm on the DGA, Directors Guild of America's Sustainable Future Committee. And we just had a meeting today about a big event that we want to do at the DGA, front and center, about sustainable filmmaking and storytelling. There's a lot of great, great organizations in Hollywood. There's one called Good Energy that consults
mm,
on scripts and how to make your storytelling more sustainable. The TV Academy does a lot of work in this space. The Producers Guild. There's a lot of alliances between the guilds that advocate green filmmaking. And really, I'll just say the biggest effect we can have on this industry that does have, unfortunately, a large carbon footprint is reducing our dependence on diesel and gas and
mm,
moving towards battery packs and electric, solar trailers and whatnot. That's going to have the biggest effect. Besides, recycling sets, reusing
right.
costumes, shopping vintage. And I'm a big fan of an app called Scriptation, where
Huh,
I've gone completely paperless. And so TV
huh,
shows
okay.
typically use millions of sheets of paper a season because they're printing a 60-page script and then a new draft
Mhm,
comes out. They're printing that
yeah,
times 50 every time there's a new
right.
draft, plus call sheets and sides and all the menus, everything. And so the one upside of COVID is a lot of these productions did go digital and paperless because nobody wanted to
Okay.
touch paper. And anyway, this app, which I love and love to promote because it makes you a better director, but it also helps the environment, has really reduced our dependence on paper.
Do you find that places where like in Toronto and Los Angeles and Vancouver, where, a lot of where a lot of productions are made, something that the communities, where a lot of these sets are, standing sets are at, getting more environmentally minded?
It's thankfully this awareness about sustainability is reaching all the different places that people shoot. But I would say that Canada is still a leader from what I see. When I've worked in
Mhm,
Vancouver, there, and this back when I did my movie Mixtape, which I'm not sure how many years ago that is, like maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago, they were, composting, everything was being recycled. After the production day, our line producer would take the excess food and take it to unhoused communities. They
okay,
were incredibly sustainable, that production, and continue to be. There's an organization called Earth Angel that consults. And when I did a show called Bull in New York, they had been hired. And so our set was very sustainable and there were signs everywhere about what to do. And I think we had a vegan meal each lunch each week, and reusable plates and silverware for lunch. So it sort of depends where you are, but it really starts with the producers and the directors and people advocating for the production to be sustainable, and the studios too. A
Yeah.
couple of the studios have, well, they all, I think, have sustainability people, but some are really, really proactive in making sure that
Mm,
their productions are as sustainable as possible.
very nice. To that point, I know you've mentioned several times this evening about the Directors Guild of America, which I guess the trade group for um, direct
Union for directors.
the new union. Yeah, yeah. So you mentioned the sustainability work, but also I know you have served on the committees to help promote more women to enter the field as far as being directors. What conversations are happening right now, especially now that we're, I guess, a year or so post the last work stoppages and those kind of things, and or what things are happening to really help bring more people in there, especially in light of the potential, some of the contraction that you've been seeing in the
Yeah,
industry.
it's a great question. So actually, contracts are being negotiated now. SAG, I think, just reached a tentative agreement, and the Writers Guild reached an agreement, and the DGA is about to start negotiating. So it was 3 years ago when we had the strike. Actually, it's
Yeah.
actually been
Wow.
a
It's been,
couple. Yeah, it's been a few years, but
yeah.
there's a major contraction. There's between 30 and 40% less television being made, and a lot of
Mm,
television that is being made has left the country and is being made abroad, and they're not hiring DGA directors, which is
mm,
problematic for so many reasons for us. So, with contraction, there's always concern by women and people of color and diversity groups that they may lose the traction that we've had in recent years because of various amazing diversity programs. So that's a big conversation, right? How do we make sure we don't
yeah.
lose gains? It does seem like everybody's being affected by this contraction. I don't have data to say it's one group more than another. Anecdotally, it seems across the board with all my friends, no matter how they identify. So, but I think we just have to be really, really vigilant and still make sure that, um, helping each other, and particularly as the co-chair of the women's steering committee, making sure that my colleagues have access to the same opportunities as the men in our guild is very important to me.
Yeah. Do you think, do you have any, do you think that the mentorship programs that have been out there before, do you feel that those are still thriving even with the contraction that's happening?
Do, and maybe even more so because in
Okay.
times like this, it becomes even more important to have be lent a hand and educated. And so I'm a mentor for the DGA. When I came into the guild after getting my first episode of TV for Chicago Med, actually it was for American Girl pilot. Um, I did this diversity initiative at the DGA as a protege, and now 10 years later, I'm able to give back and mentor somebody else. And so it's great because so much of directing TV is separate from the craft. It's a lot of, as you said, the
Mhm.
business and the politics and
Yeah.
nuanced things that you would never know. Like I said, every single show is different. So having somebody who can
Mhm.
really explain things to you and support you and be a sounding board, I think is incredibly important. And so I love being able to be a mentor, and I do think it's very important.
That's great. Yeah. I think it's very important for in any field to, to have people who've made it to be able to reach back and, and be there and be a sounding board for the up and coming folks that have that are coming behind us. I know we'll have a few minutes here left, and I know we've talked a little bit about some of the Star Trek things, but what my Star Trek fans will be like, why didn't you ask about any Star Trek? So I gotta ask you. So, what was whatever you did direct 202? What was your experience walking on the Star Trek set for the first time?
Oh, it's so cool. I mean, I truthfully hadn't seen Star Trek,
Okay.
embarrassingly so, before I got hired. Well,
Yeah.
before I interviewed to direct it. And so it was very, very exciting and daunting. But as soon as I started watching it and I started with the original series, I was like, I love this. Where has this show been all my life? This is exactly, why I want to be a director, to ask these big
Yeah.
questions in a non-political way, even though obviously there's political undertones to every episode. But because we're dealing with less recognizable tropes, we're
Right.
able to forget biases and just think about, what we think is right, which I love. And that's why I went into
Yeah.
science, is how do we cut through all the noise and get to the truth, right? And so it was very exciting and really fun, because everyone who works on that show is a huge Trekkie and such fans. And
Yeah.
so they were, when I do medical shows, there's always like one medical advisor who knows everything about
Uh-huh.
surgery and, taking blood and
Yeah.
whatnot. But on this show, there's not a dedicated Trek expert because everybody is.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
I'd
Everybody's,
be
yeah. Everyone is. Yeah.
everybody is. So I would just have to
Yeah.
wonder about something out loud, and then our gaffer would be like, "Oh yeah, that's the blah blah blah. Watch this episode, and you'll see how they do it." And I'll be like, "Great."
Yeah.
So I
Great.
loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you find having a lot of pressure given that you were coming into a fan base and a franchise that does have over 900 hours or whatever of content, and everybody on the set's an expert about, what fill in the blank as far as, thing for Star Trek. Were you able to, did you just kind of just tune it out and just, I got a job to do, or did you feel the weight of
I
stepping
think
into big property?
I don't remember ever feeling that kind of pressure, because I think no matter what show I do, there's always something, right? Whether it's a brand new show and you hope you're getting the tone right, right? You're making something that never
Yeah.
existed. Or, I'm walking into season 7 of Scandal, where everybody loves
Mm.
those characters and this is the last season, and, how what I do is going to live on
Yeah.
forever. So I think I always feel that way playing in someone else's sandbox. But
Mhm.
I think that's where my scientific background helps me. I approach it like anything else. Like, what's the truth of the scene? What is really
Yeah.
going on here? Who are these characters? Would they say this? Would they do this? Would they da 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 da? And so I think when you're being approaching the material authentically, it's very
Yeah.
hard to get it wrong. And, then having all those experts around me who would tell me, oh, they would never do this. Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
We're not going to do that, and it's a wonderful team. I mean, our production designer
Yeah.
Jonathan Lee is fabulous, and the prep was 10 days. So there was a nice long time to get to be on the sets and work with the costume
Yeah.
designers, fabulous, and just learn what I could reinvent versus
Mhm.
what you just don't touch. And it was
Right.
exciting.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I'm excited, I'm excited for, the upcoming season. I know we got word that's coming July 23rd, and I know, season 5 is coming as well, but, it's really enjoyed the 2 episodes, like I said, that you
Thank
directed
you.
as we were talking before. My day job is working in the law, and I love a good courtroom drama, and I, really, really enjoy that aspect because it's just not only from the, like you said, it the way you shot that episode, courtroom, it was very dynamic,
Oh,
and
thank
didn't feel
you.
very it wasn't static like, a lot of times you'll see goes so, much appreciation for that.
Thank you.
Uh,
And I mentioned I would talk. I'll tell you just like one tidbit about the shooting.
yeah.
So Benji Bakshi, who was my DP, actually it was my third time
Mhm.
working with him, which is
Okay.
really unusual in TV to work on 3 different
Mhm.
shows together. Um,
Yeah.
but we set about making rules for each character, and I won't take you through all of them, but just like in the case of Rebecca, Una, because she
Mhm.
was hiding her identity, we had a
Yeah.
rule that she always had to be somewhat obscured until she took the witness
Huh.
stand. So in the beginning of
Okay.
the show, you'll see there's always a table in front of her or something. You never see her fully until that moment when she decides to expose herself. and,
Yeah.
tell everybody what really happened in her past. So that's one
Yeah.
example. And we had rules similarly for all the other characters, how the camera moved with them and whatnot.
Yeah, to that point, one last Star Trek question. So, in thinking about that episode, do you find yourself thinking differently about leadership or humanity because of your experience from directing Trek? Because it is a very, it is a Star Trek. Starfleet is a sci-fi military, exploratory organization, but does have a sort of naval tradition,
Hmm.
behind it. So, and I'm sure that is maybe for all your jobs. I mean, do you find after you've done a job, you'll come out of them thinking differently about, fill in the blank?
Absolutely. I think with both the Star Trek episodes that I directed, they were about leadership. And,
Mm,
something as a director that I always try to do. And I know my colleague, Paris Barclay, who I teach the first time director class with, we always teach is find the personal, find the you in that
mm,
script. Even though you didn't write it and you're asked, you don't know what episode you're going to get, where's the you? And for me, both episodes, particularly the Kirk episode, was really about becoming a leader and learning,
yeah,
like you said, was I intimidated the first day? Sure, you're always intimidated when you're leading, but maybe in the beginning of your career, you feel like you have to come in and act like you know all the answers. Whereas you find when you finally come to grips with what being a leader is, you come in the opposite
yeah,
way. You come in more curious and open to ideas because you know what you're doing more. And so I
yeah,
loved that that was the arc for Kirk, which was that as soon as
yeah,
he started listening, he actually became the leader that we know and love in Star Trek canon.
yeah. That's awesome. One last question, and I'm gonna let you go.
Sure.
If you weren't directing tomorrow, what would you be doing?
It's a good question. I think I'd want to do something that brings people together,
Mm,
but not based on a political cause, but rather just really bridges gaps. There's a group I just became familiar with called Bell. It's the Bridge Entertainment Laboratory, I think it's called. And their whole goal is America's become very partisan and
yeah,
fractured. And their whole goal is through
yeah,
storytelling to bridge that. And I love that. I just think
yeah.
it's a shame whenever
It
we're
is.
not connecting and communicating because those barriers feel very artificial and very surmountable to me.
Yeah.
And so that's why I love being a director, and I think that's where I would try to find work if I ever didn't do this.
Awesome, awesome. Well, Dr. Weiss, I really appreciate the time that you spent with us this evening. You're more than welcome to come back and hang out anytime you would like.
Thanks.
Love to. I know there's so many more things we could have gotten into tonight, so definitely have some more areas we could love to talk more about the sustainability and your work with the DGA and some other things. But thank you so much for your time tonight.
My pleasure. Thank
Really-
you.
yeah, yeah. Don't forget, folks, May the 15th. Amazon Prime. It's not like that. All episodes will be dropping, so be sure to check it out, and also check out all of Dr. Valerie Weiss's work wherever you can get things as far as physical, streaming media, etc. And with that, thanks so much again for watching or listening to us wherever you get your podcast. You can find us at all our handles as far as our social medias and stuff at our website, and also find us on all the various audio platforms as well as YouTube by going to our website, www.cnernerdpodcast.com. And with that, good night, geek out, you're welcome.